Today, I'm going to be restoring my old childhood desk. This one's been in storage for quite some time, but it's time to dig it out and make it new again. One of the chairs is particularly damaged. The seat and the backrest have both got bits broken off of it. It's a laminated timber and they're both curved. So I'm going to have my first attempt at some wood bending. I hope you enjoy this video. Let's get straight into it. I'll just give you a quick overview of the desk and what I'm planning to do. The hinge here on the right's just come off completely, so I'll be fixing that back on. Quite a few of the bolts are missing, so I'll be replacing them. The timber itself is not too bad, but it will need a sand and a re-varnish, and I'd say the same with the paint for the desk as well. I think it's been touched up at some point over the years, but overall it's not too bad. And the two chairs, frames are very sturdy, they're looking good. This one here in particular, the timber looks quite nice, so we'll just need a couple of bolts replaced and a bit of a touch-up, whereas this chair on the left will need both of the timbers replaced. So this is what I'll be concentrating primarily on, looking at creating a nice curve for the backrest, and in particular the piece here with the curved lip. So I'm just going to start by taking everything apart on the desk and both the chairs. With everything disassembled, the first thing I'm going to get to is the wood bending. Got all the timbers laid out right here. These ones are fine. Like I said, just a sand and a varnish. And these ones are the bits I'm going to replace. Got the desk and also the chairs here. And this sheet of 3mm plywood, which I'm going to use for the back and the seat there. From the bit of research I've done, and from what I can tell, there's about 3 techniques for wood bending. One is by steaming it first. That requires quite an elaborate contraption for actually inserting the timber into it, letting it steam for a while, and then bending it from there with other contraptions to get getting the curves right. That's a little bit elaborate and probably not really what I'm after, especially as the timber I'm using is laminated. And another method similar to that is by wetting the timber first, allowing it to soak, and that kind of makes it more moldable and you can bend it from there. I'm also discarding that method. The third method is a little bit more basic, and it really is quite suitable for what I actually need, and that's by getting layers of thin timber and gluing them and clamping them in the position you need and letting them set, and it's basically laminating a curve. So I'm going to go with that method, hence the reason I've got this sheet of plywood, which is 3mm. The bum rest of the seat, which is good, is 9mm thick, so it should work out perfectly, doing 3 layers to make that 9mm. And I'll use the old piece with the crack in it as basically a template. So what I can do is just clamp the new pieces onto this, and then I know I'm going to get exactly the right curve for the new piece. Well, these are set and ready to dry. They've worked out pretty good. I only had 8 clamps, so I've used these timbers here with screws to clamp these a bit more. This one took a fair bit to get it curved, but I'm really happy with it actually. There's no sign of any cracking, which is a positive. I was a little bit nervous about that. I'll leave them to set. And while I'm doing that, I'll get these ones and sand them back, ready for some varnish. So I've got all the sanding of the timber complete now. And I've just put this piece aside for a little bit of modifying. I also have this desk here. It's just a single one and a little bit higher than the other one I have. One thing I did notice is this hole here. Now I believe it's for an inkwell. The smaller double desk though doesn't have. Not sure why that is. Maybe it's got to do with high school and primary school desks. Perhaps these ones were for older children maybe, and they had ink pots, whereas maybe this smaller desk was for preschoolers or something and they weren't allowed the inkwell pens. But I purchased a couple of these. They're handmade inkwells out of porcelain, and so what I'm going to do is add them to this desk, and I'm just going to imitate what is on this desk here. Basically lightly countersunk edges and a hole for it to sit in, and they sit really nicely, so that's quite a good fit, basically flush with the timber there. And it's been over 24 hours now since I've clamped these, so the glue should be well and truly set. The bottle said 12 hours, so I've gone with over double that just to make sure. So I'll undo them and see how they look. And that's worked out really well. It's holding under pressure now. That glue is well and truly set. What I've already done here is use this as a stencil for creating the shape. And then I've marked it out with painter's tape here, so that when I cut it out with the jigsaw, hopefully the tape should stop any of this plywood from chipping. Shout out to my brother-in-law Luke for that idea. So I'll just get a nice fine tooth jigsaw blade and cut that out. There we have it. All the timber work is done. These two bits are matching the other chair now. As you can see though, the timber is a fair bit lighter than there. I think there's several reasons for that. One is that this has still got traces of varnish on it. I am kind of restricted to how far back I sand it, and that's because it's laminated. If I go too far back, you'll start seeing a different grain and different coloring underneath, which this one's right on the edge of that already. So that's why I've sort of stopped with this one. The other reason I think is also the aging and weathering of it. It is quite old, and that sort of gives it a darker look over time. Not to worry though, I think I'll just do maybe another coat on this one, possibly just one coat on these and then 2 coats on this one, and that should make it a bit darker, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, which will be quite soon. But before I get onto varnishing, I'm just going to look at this desk and the frames of these chairs. Probably a bit of a scrub and a light sand also, which will create dust, and I'm wanting to get that done before I get onto varnishing. And then from there we can get some black paint on them and varnish on the timber. The varnish and paint has opportunity to dry overnight, so all that is set. I've ended up using a darker varnish for these 2 pieces, the ones that I made, just to try and get the coloring the same. It's still not quite there, but these pieces are starting to get a bit of a texture from the amount of layers I've used, so I'm just gonna stop there. They're pretty close, I'm happy with that. And now for the most enjoyable part of any restoration project, and that's putting everything back together. There's another thing missing from the desks, and that was some chain. So I've purchased this. There was screws underneath the desk and also on the side to indicate that there was a chain stopping the lid from going all the way back, and I'll install it as well as part of putting it all back together. So while I was doing this project, I actually mentioned to my mum and uncles and aunties that I was restoring it, and mum mentioned that she remembers purchasing them off of school. They were swapping them out for new plastic desks. Each desk was $10 and the chairs were $5 each. And they actually remember using the desks themselves as children at the same school, which is pretty cool. We had a bit of a discussion on how old we think they were. As they had spots for inkwells, the indication was that the desks were made before biros were used. So after a bit of a discussion, I think we've concluded that they would have been probably made around the 1950s, which marks them as about 70 years old, which is pretty amazing. Kind of cool to look into the history of some of these things, and with the sturdy build and these restorations, I hope that they'll be around for many more years. And there we have it, guys. The desk is all finished and put together. Got the chains. That's gonna stop putting stress on the hinges. That's part of the reason why these hinges were probably broken. The old screws had torn out. Some felt pads here, and that's going to stop a little bit of the slamming as well. The inkwells are a nice addition, I think, to these. Time to move it inside and see how it looks. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Maybe for some of you it was a bit of a walk down memory lane. Otherwise, I hope you found this video helpful in case you maybe were looking at doing wood bending, or otherwise just enjoyed it for a good old restoration project. God bless. See you in the next one.